Доброго дня, шановні глядачі.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, our guests. Good afternoon, dear panel participants. Today we have the Day of Knowledge, and due to this, we had decided to have this discussion, which is called Integrity in Modern Ukrainian Schools, and what integrity at school reality check, and to understand whether we have joint agenda. Today we have Mr. Oleksandr Novikov, chairperson of the National Agency on Counteraction to Corruption, Ms. Tkeshelashvili, program director of the Anti-Corruption Support to Leaders in Ukraine, supported by USAID. Then Mr. Vadym Karandiy, director of Ukrainian Education Development Institute, Mr. Serhiy Horbachev, first educational ombudsman in Ukraine, Ms. Tytysh, from Smart Education, Mr. Elkin from EdCamp Ukraine via Zoom, and Ms. Olena Parfionova, co-founder of the Parent SOS Association. My first question is to Mr. Novikov. As far as I understand, the mission of your agency is to create the transparent educational space. At the level of the United Nations, corruption is recognized as a threat to humanity and to all types of societies, and today we understand that we have to adapt to the challenges of the modern world, and unless today we teach children how to be zero tolerant to corruption, in future we threaten to have corrupt government officials. And on the other hand, integrity is a duty of each citizen. This is what we're trying to explain to all the students in school, and we try to apply both short-term and long-term approach. So how do we reach them? We discuss corruption and anti-corruption concepts at school, then discuss specific cases and suggest to choose right models of behavior in each of those cases. And we strongly believe that we can get rid of corruption only bringing up new generations of children who are very much aware about what corruption is and what and how it should be counteracted. So we try to teach children how to act right, even if nobody knows about that. And doing that, we should keep in mind that a school means not only children, but also the faculty of that school. That's why we work with the principals of schools, we work with teachers. We understand that without sufficient or decent fees and salaries paid at schools, and without changing the attitude to the teacher's profession, this won't be possible. Mr. Tkeshelashvili, I would like to ask a question to you. You're leader of a program in the agency, which is a good partner.
today, but then greet everybody who's watching us, especially if they have kids and if they have children at school. It's an important day for many who first time went to the school today, and then for those who are returning for education and the educational institutions. Well, I think for any of us today, and then for all those who are viewing us, there is no question mark as to why integrity and anti-corruption as such as efforts from the side of the government matter in Ukraine, and why corruption and then perhaps the lack of high degree of integrity in educational institutions is a problem when it comes to how future is being formed in Ukraine, and then how it is determined now in the way how our children will be living tomorrow and then day after tomorrow in the future in Ukraine. So in that sense, for the US government, for USAID, for our program, youth has always been a very serious focus point when it comes to activities, engagements, and efforts that has been directed to make sure that youth in Ukraine is capable to play already now, not only in the future, an active role in transforming the future of Ukraine already with what is happening now. And if we speak about the youth, I would want to enlarge a bit the concept from schools even to the youth which is in the universities. Because in that sense, there is very fine line that is in between the different target audiences, so to say, if we speak about youth at schools and then those who are in the universities, especially at the beginning when they enter the universities. So if we speak about the integrity and then importance of understanding and awareness of the importance of integrity by the students at schools and in universities, it has a huge implication of, again, as Alexander mentioned, what will be the future of Ukraine, including in the public administration, but then beyond. Because what we have noticed already quite clearly, every one of us in our everyday life, is that integrity matters both in private businesses as much as in public administration, and it's all intertwined in the way that if we place the right focus on our children, on youth now, for our future and their future in that regard, it's not about only how public administration will be built tomorrow, which is very important, but how private actors, private businesses, anybody developing the entrepreneurial activities in Ukraine will be less tolerant, I would say, in a very mild way, but then non-tolerant, as this is what we would wish to have in the future when it comes to corruption and lack of integrity. There are two areas in which we've concentrated quite a bit our efforts to have comprehensive approach for that. One is a direct engagement with youth, with children at school, with parents, with teachers, and we've had great cooperation with the public ombudsman, not public ombudsman, but an educational ombudsman here in Ukraine, as much as civil society organizations who are very active in this direction in Ukraine. But then we have had quite a bit of efforts directed at changing environments in which children are present at school as well. And we are cooperating very actively on that with NAPC for that matter as well, because there is one stream of activities that could be directed how we change or shape, I would say, better rather than change awareness and value sets of our children at school by direct interaction with very creative ways of engaging them in conceptualizing anything related to integrity and corruption per se, but then working directly with schools, with teachers, with civil society organizations that bring more transparency and accountability to schools, including the way how schools are spending money, how they are improving educational environment in an integral way for children, so that they experience firsthand that the environment in which they get education at school has this integrity embedded into it. Because if you only talk about integrity with children, they're very sensitive in sensing fakeness if they see that in real life there is not something as much aligned with the concepts that they're talked about, but the life is too different from that. So comprehensive approach on that when it comes to how one changes environment in which they live, shapes with that the value sets for their future is equally important to direct engagement through which we encourage them, provoke them to think more about the issues that otherwise might not have been big issues for them to conceptualize, because children are children. They have their own priorities and agendas, obviously, but then at the same time, they can be as deep in thinking about the issues that we are talking today as we grown-ups are. And I guess that many of us who have had or having now children of that age or have had them recently until they turn to be grown-ups already, we remember how eager they are to have that conversation with their teachers, with us as parents, and then this is a responsibility that we bear as individuals and as programs who have a strategic objective of helping any country, and in this case, Ukraine, to change its present and its future in the way that it's conducive to democratic development, economic prosperity, and in that sense is an example of how integrity, rule of law, and lack of corruption is an environment in which societies flourish.
Дякую. Дякую, пані Еко, за таку розгорнуту відповідь і за цей комплексний підхід, з яким ви насправді підходите. Пане Вадиме, питання до вас.
Vadym, my next question is to you. Ukrainian Education Development Institute develops the courses on for anti-corruption trainings, raising public awareness, etc. So my question to you, whether the topic remains in focus in the society and in your activity, or whether it is slightly put aside. The topic remains in focus because it is one of the biggest challenges today. If we wish to form healthy society, we have to shape proper values in young childhood, even not in school, but earlier in kindergartens. And today, integrity had the concept of integrity had become the part of Ukrainian law, Ukrainian legislation. For example, we have pieces of legislation specifically devoted to the issue of academic integrity, and academic integrity is backed up with such special laws as the law on education, the law about educators, and this work should continue. We should make the further step and reflect integrity in the standards for educational institutions. It seems to me that we still cannot say that we had covered all the aspects in which corruption may rise. That's why I believe that civil society organizations like Smart Education did. For example, several days ago, we witnessed presentation of their efforts is the example of a very successful approach to this issue. And I think this is a big task for civil society and for pedagogical community, how to involve children into development of these anti-corruption and integrity values. And thinking in this field, I guess that we should maybe involve lawyers to the process. Perhaps we should find good cases how the integral approaches and values are applied in everyday life, in various situations, and thus we will be able to bring up new generations and to build up society based on the integral values. Serhiy, as educational ombudsman, what challenges, what problems in terms of integrity do you see the most often?
This is a comprehensive problem about integrity, the rules. This is about financing of education, first of all, and distribution of funds, subsidy for education and its use, and support of proper educational space and how money is spent, whether it is spent fairly. And also important component of integrity is the academic integrity, and it is identified in Article 42 of the law on education, and also there is a draft law. There will be a separate law on academic integrity, and this is really important. And also accurate question is a lack of integrity among teachers, and sometimes certificates are sold, and I got a proposal to pay for the certificate of the course that I've developed. And I have seen an announcement in the group that some people wanted to sell the certificate on academic integrity. So this is just bingo. So this is a comprehensive issue, and we should provide a comprehensive approach to it. I believe that this is the work for many years, because lack of integrity and corruption, they are supported by a complex argument that I'm against corruption, but my people will solve everything. So we should convince people, and we should work with this issue properly. Thank you very much that you raised such difficult questions, and you continue to work on this topic, and this is really important and of value. Galina, you are one of those people who inspired New Ukrainian School, and the school should be child-centered and to work with many important things and to help to develop children. And I would like to ask you about integrity in the learning process and how it is reflected in the process. The topic of integrity is really important, and it is difficult to say that this is training if it is not integral and fair. This will be just confusion. This won't be learning. And in the New Ukrainian School, we speak a lot about it, and I hope we will have opportunity to speak about it in more detail. We also developed some lessons in order to speak about it more broadly. So Vadym mentioned that this is a very important topic, and we have it in the state standard, and we believe that the situation is better than it was before. Also, one important topic that was mentioned, that for real learning of integrity, we need to have a partnership, the pedagogical partnership, because values of integrity, they are in the horizontal level of relations, not in the domination sphere. Victoria Brinza said that integrity is impossible in the sphere of domination, and this was done in under communism. So children should have agency, they should be subjective, and the approach should be child-centered. And this is really important to develop this integrity in schools. Thank you very much. Now we speak with Oleksandr Elkin. Starting 2018, you deal with this topic of integrity in education. And we would like to ask you whether this topic is still acute. And there is a Telegram chat of Physical Mathematical Lyceum 26, and there is a year of celebration for them, and I would like to greet everyone who start a new academic year, and I would like to thank all those who provided us with education. And also, I remember that there was Nirvana and Kurt Cobain, and he had wonderful words that the obligation of young people is to fight against corruption, and the teachers, they should support students in this. And now I'm an optimist, but I remember Maxim Kluchar from USAID. He told me about this idea that we should promote and to propagate the integrity in education. And at the time, I had a skeptical approach because I understood that this was a taboo topic. And he addressed us because we traditionally worked with difficult topics, topics of non-discrimination, and we believe that we should deal with it. And the first step we've made, we carried out a national survey concerning retraining of teachers, and this was the basis for the transformation of the field. And what is interesting for our topic is that teachers, they needed retraining. 10% of them, they said that they wanted to have a training concerning integrity and corruption prevention. This is not a lot if you compare it with the professional burnout topic, but more than non-discrimination, we have the 7% of such teachers. And after 3-year marathon, we joined thousands of educators, and we included many thousands of educators in our awareness campaigns. And I always say that this was really active, and in the result of approbation, we may say that those who believe corruption negative in education, their cohort has been increased, and based on our experience, I would like to say that educators, 82% of educators who participated in our program, they are convinced that schools are able to help children to learn what integrity means. And I support the idea of Kurt Cobain that teachers could do this. So we have grassroots results and results of the policy. The resolution 800 concerning improvement of qualification. There is issue of non-tolerance and fighting corruption, and in professional standard mentioned by Vadym, for the first time we got emotional and ethical competence, because integrity topic is connected with values, and now this is professional responsibility, and each educator should develop in this area, not only want to do this, but they should do it because this is obligatory now. I would like to say what is lacking. And this is based on our practical experience. We believe that there are many efficient, active instruments concerning integrity and anti-corruption, but we need to unite them and to create good retraining programs that will work in the institutions who train teachers. And not only for active teachers. We need professional community who will get united and they will be able to support each other at the peer level. Also, we believe, and the teachers demand this, we should think through the models of involvement and how to speak about integrity and anti-corruption with parents, because we understand how to provide this information to children, but how to work with parents, how to support them, how to involve them to the process. And the fifth thing I would like to mention is the development of reflection and new competences, new skills. And the way to integrity is really a long way. We cannot just switch, and we cannot just get this full integrity at once. We should reflect on this, and values, they are always a choice, and the teacher may only support this choice to make this choice right. Thank you, Alexander. And now we go back to Olena Parfionova, who represents Parents SOS NGO. And you work with the problems connected with schools, and do you see some developments concerning transparency? Do we see some changes? Yes, we see them. Of course, this is insufficient, but the main thing is the contest for the top positions in these institutions. Despite terrible pressure and negativity, we were able to provide equal access to educational institutions. This issue is regulated concerning the primary schools. Now we are speaking about lyceums and gymnasiums, and we have here a lot of issues for discussion. But I hope that in a year we will be able to start to resolve this issue. And understand the integrity issue. This is not only about bribes for repair works, for curtains, but this is also the things of cheating during exams, or that parents are forced to buy some materials, and this is tolerated not only by parents but also by teachers, because this is easier for them. And the issue of paid lessons, we know when, for example, they read pages 34 to 45, and then this teacher, he provides paid lessons for example, 100 hryvnias an hour for the same students. So there is lack of political will, small salaries, curricula is underdeveloped. And I would like to add to what Alexander said, that anti-corruption and integrity should be taught in schools, but we also should have this in the in universities programs. We are speaking about the new wave of people, new officials, and who taught them, and according to which curricula. So this issue of integrity is really comprehensive. 2 hours is not enough to discuss this problem. Maybe several weeks will not be enough even. And during these 7 years, I see that there are many positive changes. But of course, everyone wants to get good results at once. And there are many traditional things. For example, my grandparents, my parents, and I should bring something to that. And now we have more opportunities to overcome corruption and non-integrity in schools. Thank you very much, dear colleagues, for this first part. We really had different views, and now we'll start a good part, how to resolve this problem, because we see the scope of the problem. Of course, we won't be able to solve this problem in 1 month or 1 year, but we understand that we should move in this direction in order that in 10, 20, or 30 years to have fair society and integrity in society. So now we are going to speak about what we may do. So please, you may take time to speak, and we start with Oleksandr. Please tell us about anti-corruption instruments that EdCamp developed and lessons learned. Thank you.
I would like to start from reflection to what I heard from Ms. Parfionova. Despite the fact that today I'm in Kharkiv, not with you, but I'm very happy that this topic had brought together the whole coalition of stakeholders who can have impact, who can influence and push up the course of affairs in right direction. And today I would like to start with some of our achievements. Our project has been working for 3 years now, and I should say that during this period we had experienced big transformation. We started with the toolkit for the role games, and one of the first games was called What and Where and How. This is one of the formats which attracts and eagerly involves both children and their parents. It is a type of a game which involves children, which involves the audience, while mafia type game, but with the questions of a sort: what does your school buy? What does your family buy, etc. They interact with other aspects of curiosity, human curiosity. So these were the first games. Then we improved them, and at later stage we included the philosophy which sounds as follows: each human being makes solutions based on the strive to happiness, strive to appreciation, and strive to success. And corruption actually hinders these efforts, and corruption actually brings you to discrimination, and all humans acting based on corrupt practices, they lose in all their aspirations sooner or later. and instead of offering money, service, etc., you should say, you should find different ways to interact with people. You should try to build up partner relations and trying to apply this into practice. In schools, we found out that in case of this attempt to build up partner relations between all the stakeholders like parents, teachers, school administration, and students, this allows to build up trust and integrity. In result of that effort, we produced this leaflet, this brochure, better to say, and disseminated it via internet. Smart Education, Parent Source, etc., had also produced this collection of guidelines for schools and for parent communities, all the stakeholders of educational institutions. It demonstrates what corruption is and what corruption is not. Because quite often it is not so easy to understand in reality whether some situation means corruption or not. It is on the border between integrity and corruption, and everything depends on the situation. Then the further aspect of our work would be academic integrity. In this relation, we mean that Ukraine requires a special training course how to learn. That is, learning to learn. Based on integral approach, not trying to make it in corrupt way. And one more piece of our experience, in result of this 3 years, thinking about anti-corruption and about tools, I believe that the networking model is the best. From one educator to another educator, sharing positive experiences, the best practices allows us to reach as many educators as possible and to share the best practices and thus raise trust eventually. Then about pedagogical models, which are worth applying to educational practices. I believe this should be three-staged pedagogical model. At first stage, you translate knowledge, then you bring children to critical thinking about different situations, about integrity in practice, and in result of this 2 stages, you come to the 3rd stage when integrity becomes a part of the value kit in kids' minds. Then we should popularize at the state level not just negative situations and experiences and practices about corruption, but what is more important, we should widely popularize successes in this area. And eventually, I would like to mention what is good to develop. You mentioned private repetition and training of students in classes. I believe that should be allowed officially at the governmental level as one of the activities allowed to teachers, and thus they should be partially funded or fully funded by the state. That is, the least successful students should be officially supported, additionally supported by the teachers. Thank you, Alexander. I believe that you contributed the most to the networking among teachers. Nobody did more than you did in this area. And you managed to turn the pedagogical conferences into the big, joyful events similar to the rock star performances. That is, teachers celebrate each such event when they are brought together. Thank you for these good words. I believe that our biggest achievements is among union or bringing together the youth, the students of younger students of secondary schools, and students of high schools. I believe that this will bring the best results. Galina, some weeks ago, you presented integrity lessons for the primary schools. Why did you decide to work with the primary school, and what inspired you for this work? Thank you for this question. Actually, Alexander made a good introduction to my intervention. Their project started to work with the more senior school students, while we decided to approach to children between 7 and 10 years of age. And these are like under teenagers. They are not too young to abstain from very serious topics, but they are not adult enough to be presented serious issues in very serious way. That's why we decided to be very organic, so to say. That is to tackle the everyday cases, the everyday behavior models which children witness in everyday life. We did not want to conflict with what children face at home or at school every day. And in result of that work, we produced this book. EdCamp contributed much, Mr. Oleksandr Elkin, then Oleksandr Royce, a psychologist, reviewed all the materials from psychological point of view and checked them against psychological security, psychological comfort for children. Thus, we presented some topics at the level of a fairy tale, in a form of a fairy tale, to make them more understandable for children. So this book consists of 12 topics, and as a basis, we took this document issued by the Organization for Economic and Social Development, and it advises about the approach. It suggests that children should be taught the rules, the values, and anti-corruption principles. The same document and EdCamp recommendations was that we should not present just principles, bare principles. We should present cases and describe the values which are involved into each case. And quite often this demonstrates tough choices which we have to make. For example, either I should win honestly or just pay money in some competition, how to manage waste, either to throw it out and poison environment or to pay for waste management. And each case is quite clear for children. These lessons which we offer in this book, the main character is in talk, integrity, and okay. Look at this small character, and it becomes a friend who communicates with children at all stages, and they meet him or her at the first page, and then they read comics about her, make pictures, invent some stories, etc. And discussing that, we bring in voluntary work, integrity, kindness, mercy, etc. All the qualities that we would like to see in our children after the Integrity Forum, which happened several days ago. We had received mass requests for this textbook, and we disseminated more than 1,000 of books. You can find all the materials on our website. We do not wish parents to pay for it, and we believe that eventually we will find money to disseminate it among as many schools as possible. By the way, we were not the beginners who or founders of this project, but we joined it. Thank you, Galina. At the presentation of your textbook, we noticed how teachers were happy and enthusiastic about it, and how many teachers decided to introduce it immediately to their learning practice every day, especially for primary school. Olena, how do you think, what current projects of the Parent SOS could be mentioned today? On August 17, we had presented the school guidelines. It comprises 30 questions and answers for parents. These are the most frequently asked questions by parents, and they reflect the everyday problems of school life. And from the moment when we disseminated that we had received many feedback, pieces of feedback from parents. Each year we receive approximately the same questions coming from parents, and they come seasonally. That is, the questions about refurbishments come in April, the questions about what textbooks to buy come in August, the questions about necessary medical certificates also arrive on seasonal basis, and preparing that publication, we had to choose among 100 of the most frequently asked questions, and we were very much surprised to see that the biggest number of questions was about bullying, and we were surprised, but when we started to look deeper, we found out that the biggest cases of bullying were related to money requests from children. And in result of that, we had produced templates for each typical situation when additional money payments are requested from parents, from the school uniform up to each request for a textbook. And our dream is to publish as many school guidelines or guidelines for schools as possible, and to present such a book to each first grade newcomer this year. For example, teachers request a uniform from junior students, primary school students. That's not required by the law. Then some families say that they have to pay money for school refurbishments because local administration, district administration had not paid for refurbishments, and we came to conclusion that we require the educational legislation, a special area of legislation. Then about the competition for school principals, the legislation about competition or selection of school principals still remains not in the perfect wording, not in the perfect language in legislation. then some schools till now do not have the compulsory coverage districts, that is, the territory children from which should compulsory be enrolled to this that school. And also, we now hope very much that by 2023 we will have new rules how children should enter lyceums and gymnasia. We see our mission as continuous public awareness. We would like to eradicate the common law at schools and to introduce the proper legislation, written legislation to schools. And I absolutely agree with you that parents should know the provisions of the law, and I'm happy that all the stakeholders have to interact in this process, and the interaction between individual stakeholders is very important. At this point, I would address to Serhiy, who can comment on the rights and duties of teachers.
Thank you very much for your question. The most difficult thing in my work now, when I get a request and I see that de facto there is a violation, but it is not identified in the law. So no legal identification of this act as a violence, or there is no mechanism how to fight violations. There is a big problem connected with anti-corruption and with impartiality, and this is connected with positive changes that was the result of decentralization. We have many problems. Locally, decentralization becomes federalization, and locally, they do what they want, and there is no proper mechanism how to bring those officials to justice. We lack the mechanisms, and this is a big problem. Laws, rights are violated. It is difficult to restore them. And what can we do to carry out this anti-corruption policy and policy of integrity? First of all, we should carry out a research. We should create proper media space. And I would like to ask journalists. Olena mentioned that many things we got accustomed to are, in fact, illegal. And corruption is based on customs that exist, and they are really persistent, and there is big inertia, and a lot of efforts are needed to change this inertia. And for us, it was important to understand, and for my colleagues as well, we need to understand what is going on with the protection of rights and with integrity and with fighting corruption. Based on my initiative, we've prepared the first in Ukraine, this first report. This is about protection of rights in educational sector. And we've tried to see what rights we have, how these rights are adhered to or violated, and what we may do about it. And the conclusion we've made in this report, we were supported by Renaissance Foundation and AIDAS think tank, and our legislation in the sphere, it is detailed, and in many aspects it is really detailed, but there are two sides. that show that it is not ideal. From one side, many norms are obsolete, they do not work, and there are a lot of problems, and many problems of society are not reflected in the legislation. That's why we address deputies, the Ministry of Education, the Cabinet of Ministers, in order to introduce changes. And the problem mentioned by Olena, they carried out a survey concerning financing, and there is bullying of parents, and we get a lot of requests concerning this, and I hope that USAID will support us, and we have plans to fight this problem, what we may do, and this is a concrete proposal. And there is bullying against parents. They say that money is lacking. But the institutions, they have this money, but they do not use this money efficiently. And they ask parents for money. And I believe that we should provide changes to Article 25 of Law on Education, and also it concerns also Article 26 first. The need should be established, and they should make these needs public, and we should mention this in Article 30, and this will bring us to a critical parameter of transparency, because they ask parents for money, but money is in the budget for these needs. This is a separate topic. 7 billion of subsidy for education is not used, actually, and everything is not so simple. Sometimes there is incompetence and even intentional hiding of money, and there are complex budget procedures and complex calculations of the subsidy, and we face unfair situations at the grassroots level. One territory, one community, for example, they have more subsidies than others, and some communities have a lot of money, but they do not speak about it, and other communities, and they lack money for schools, for teachers, for salaries, because this formula of educational subsidy is not calculated properly. Look, I would like to show to you. Look, in this report, I would like to show a small map. Here it is. These are the requests from throughout Ukraine concerning optimization of the network. And there is also the issue of corruption and integrity. There is an issue of communication that is really painful. Very often, when we make requests to local power, to educational department, and to the head of the community, we get professional calculation of this optimization of the educational network. For example, they have such a number of children and this number of schools, and we may provide optimization, but many people do not know about this, and parents, they protest against this because no one provides information to them. The most important for us now is to raise these issues, and I understand that we should have zero tolerance to these unfair cases, and we should respond to them properly. And for this, we should work together. We should speak about this, even if people do not like to discuss such topics. Thank you, Serhiy. I believe that your report is really valuable because it provides different opinions on the topic, because often we see only one side and we do not have comprehensive view. And your report provides this comprehensive approach. And we should look at the problem from different sides. And your report is really valuable for those who are working on the topic of anti-corruption, education, and other topics. So this is very big, valuable contribution, and we are waiting for the next report next year. We go back to about transparency and integrity. Is it enough to create educational materials, or we should do something else as well? So about materials that were presented by our colleague and Marina and Alexander, and these materials are really valuable. And previously, we haven't spoken about these values in educational process, so we should work on these materials. We should make them available. They should be more than. Halyna provided a good example. When we are speaking about the materials, this is not only about manuals. These are additional materials for students. And also of value are materials for teachers, how to work with these materials, and we should do everything possible to make these materials available. And Ukrainian Institute of Development of Education is an administrator of online school. And in several months, we will be able to place different materials. We may position them on this national platform. They will be available to all educational institutions that have access to internet. But any materials and manuals, they are just like bricks. And master is needed to create a building from these separate blocks. I'm speaking about the role of the teacher. We should focus, and this is in the strategy of development of education. These are the issues connected with the development of teachers. They should have proper understanding of values, and they should be able to bring these values to their students. This is about refresher training, and these programs are based on professional standards. And our institute participated in the development of these programs. Alexander also mentioned the projects we carry out, and we put effort in order that this process of retraining be decentralized, and the teacher should be able to choose the program in accordance with which he will undergo this refresher training. Also, we need to speak more about the instruments to carry out assessment of professional competences of teachers, because we should help teachers, for example, to show them where they should work more on their professional issues or the issue of integrity. We should provide courses. We should show how teachers may undergo these courses and how to provide assessment to the activity. We should also think about the development of instruments of assessment, certification for the teachers, and this is the element of our legislation. Thank you, Vadym. And you've highlighted the issue of teachers and their training, because often we look at what is important for students, but we should focus also on teachers, because they should have proper understanding of the topic, otherwise they won't be able to deal with this topic properly. Also important is the topic of the course. For example, I believe that this topic is really specific. For example, lessons of integrity It is difficult to provide them in the curricula. And all the teachers, they should know about these issues in order to provide them for all components, starting Ukrainian language and other subjects. And they should provide it through different subjects, and only in such a way we may reach a good result. We should create an atmosphere of integrity at schools, and children, they should be engulfed by this atmosphere. Please tell us about the efficiency of the instruments that are now introduced concerning anti-corruption, and what we have and what is lacking.
And some of the elements that have been mentioned by the different speakers, just to maybe summarize from the perspective of a donor organization and program which implements the assistance to Ukraine in this direction. One, from our perspective, it is the key is to increase capacities for actors that are local actors who are delivering change in Ukraine. So in this regard, I think it is important to underline that we are not in the position to bring change, we are in the position to help to implement the change that is authentic, it's local, and is driven by the Ukrainian actors. And in this case, we've had a pleasure of cooperating for almost 5 years by now with partners such as the ones that are presented here today, and then we had the pleasure of helping and assisting in the development of some of the materials and then the tools that have been presented today as well, when it comes to manuals, when it comes to the toolkits. And if one would summarize that direction of the work that is being done, we speak about the word ammunition was being mentioned, but if we make it more sort of civilian in the definition, it's content. So part of the direction in which program like ours has been assisting for a number of years in Ukraine has been with the development of the content, so that the content that is accessible, that is reflective of the local realities and tailored to the specificity of understanding of the problems that it needs to be dealing with and focused at is something that we've been very keen to develop. And then here I would say that I fully agree with your comment, and would comment from my side that comprehensive approach was exactly that, not to concentrate only on kids, students per se, but to have a comprehensive approach in which students, teachers, and then parents would have been part of the common effort. So for example, the toolkit that has been developed as a manual, as lessons that have been developed for educational institutions like schools, have been over the time modified and edited in such a ways that they're not only for students, they're not only for the teachers, but they're edited versions for all the three categories, so that we have materials for the teachers, we have materials for parents, which have become very active in terms of demanding materials like that and getting acquainted with content like that, and for the students themselves. But then if we speak about development of the content, we always have to bear in mind that it cannot replicate itself to the fullest, because we need to be creative in understanding how children are perceiving information, how reflective they are of the issues in the way that it becomes accessible to them. We've spoken about the young children in the primary schools, but then in the middle school and then the high school as well, right? These are the different target audiences with different way of digesting information and acting on the information. So in that regard, that understanding of the nuances and then tailoring of the content to the specific category of the recipient, so to say, of that information is extremely important. What I would add into that, the way we've been approaching this process was to make it as interactive and creative as possible. So most of the tools and instruments that have been developed and processes that we've assisted in terms of implementation, they were not just the trainings, they were not just, development of the books or the manuals or the training content in that regard, but then delivering method and formatting of those tools have been very important for them to become effective. We've had a great pleasure of working with organizations here in Ukraine from civil society that have been very innovative in developing the content through games, through well-known names like Mafia games, for example, well-known games like When, What, and Where, where you are participating with some competitive edge into it. You are having the drive of being interactive in the game, and you are digesting information in a completely different way. It's not a lecture. It's not a dialogue that you are partially conduced to be part of, but then you are very enthusiastic in participating into it. Qualification of teachers, we as a program are not dealing directly when it comes to the overall qualification development processes with the teachers, but then when it comes to the integrity, when it comes to the corruption, this is an important element, how teachers themselves are becoming drivers of the change. We have helped development of the whole network of ambassadors, as we call it, of well-trained teachers who are themselves now acting as ambassadors on anti-corruption and integrity, themselves are teaching further other teachers and their students, and then now promoting new ideas about how better we could deliver more on integrity-related front with the teachers. But part of qualifications when it comes to what could be done in the future, what could be a lacking element, and then we've talked quite a bit about integrity in educational process, plagiarism, for example, right? This is where it all starts when it comes to the value sets that we have as the grown-ups. So when it comes to qualification of teachers, I believe that there are elements which go beyond selectiveness of whether or not they want to be trained in this area. But if you make a choice to be a teacher, there are elements that you have to have as a knowledge base, and you have to subscribe to for you to have that right and that privilege to teach children and then be part of their development as individuals. And then if one is not that inclined or enthusiastic to spend time on the issues like that, well, they can find other jobs perhaps to do. They could be well qualified to do that, but not being in the position when they can have a great influence and impact on the individual development and personalities and value sets of children and then the students. One element that I would want to mention here relates to the students. I'm mixing perhaps the target audiences, but then we firmly believed that when we spoke about the youth, it was not only middle school or high school categories of the children, but then the universities as well. And with the help of our program, for the first time in Eastern Europe, first master's degree program on anti-corruption has been established here in Ukraine in Kyiv-Mohyla University. So that now we've had this year already first graduates. The new lineup of the students already is being selected, and these are enthusiastic, committed young people who have decided already at the stage of their professional development to study at the master's degree studies in anti-corruption, and by that to contribute to the comprehensive transformation of Ukraine when it comes to the future. We've had a great pleasure of assisting Ukraine in developing State Builder program, and that's an interesting dimension as well for young generation of Ukrainians who are inclined to be part of the public service, to be equipped with knowledge, to have exposure with practitioners like Olexander here, for example, to understand what it takes to be in the leadership position like that, to understand what it takes to drive change in public institutions. So finding, attracting, and equipping younger generation like that is an extremely important task that we all bear as a responsibility, and then we've had, as I've said, a great pleasure of assisting programs and processes like that and continue to do so. Some of the elements when it comes to how accountability or transparency could be better brought to the schools. Digitalization is an interesting tool here in this field as well. We've cooperated with Transparency International on a very interesting project which creates a digital map of schools and an open access to all the expenditures that they have. So, and then it's broadening now with more and more schools to be part of it. So what it takes now for a parent to check whether or not your school actually has money from different public sources for them to spend on refurbishment of the school, there be or anything else that they have legitimate right to spend on, and in the meantime they're asking you as a parent to contribute more, you can check it without asking anybody in the school. And I guess that makes it easier, anonymous, and instantaneous in modern times for that to be transparent and accountable and accessible to anybody anywhere. So as much as we can utilize what digitalization brings to our lives, it has challenges as well, our kids are spending more and more time in front of computer screens, but it has a great element of that accessibility and transparency that could be utilized. Yes, it requests and necessitates investments into it, but that's an effort and assistance that international partners of Ukraine, apart from Ukrainian government, is willing to bear and then provide and then bring more possibilities to that end. And finally, Oleksandr might mention more on that, but the new portal that will be operational by the end of this year already for whistleblowers will be an interesting platform for anybody to utilize for bringing information about violations that have been mentioned now in completely anonymous way. So there will be no paperwork, no extra efforts that will be needed for anybody to actually highlight information on violations that we have spoken about. It will be a click of a button with more information that you have that you need to provide into the portal. More educational activities will be needed so everybody understands what it takes to do that, how responsible we need to be by bringing information, obviously, by that to the authorities. But at the end of the day, it's about civic culture and value sets in which we all understand that we all, as citizens of any country, bear responsibility for our own future. Governments are there based on the social contract that we have to create environment in which they provide rule of law, order, security, level play field for everybody to explore the opportunities. But it's not that we are not bearing any responsibilities ourselves to make that future transformative for ourselves. And then in that regard, we have great examples here today again of our civil society representatives that already act on this responsibility and are extremely vibrant and creative and innovative in terms of bringing that change. So in that regard, final note, and I have to leave earlier than others, and I want to excuse myself into that. I fully agree with one comment that has been mentioned, that success stories matter. While transparency of information is needed, in-depth understanding of the challenges is needed, accountability and responsibility for violations is needed. We need success stories not to be hidden stories as well, so that our younger generation is inspired. They understand that change in Ukraine is not only a possibility that is happening now already, and then Ukraine has come a long way in transforming itself from where it was even few years ago, but more needs to be done. And they are the ones that will be bringing partially already quite soon that change to their own country, but they need to be inspired, and we need to think how best we can inspire them of these possibilities for them to feel that they are proud citizens of their own country and they are proud citizens of the global liberal world order as well in that regard.
Дякую, пані Еко. Я б хотіла тут, мабуть, підкреслити ще раз цю різносторонність інструментів, які насправді.
So I would like to highlight that this matter is not only about schools, this is also about universities, and instruments are important, and Interaction did a lot starting 2018, and now we have not only lessons, and this anti-corruption topic previously was not interesting for children, and now it is of interest due to interactive format, and now there is a new standard, and our partners followed this, and we really thank our colleagues for this. Thank you for your participation. Alexander, we go back to you. Please tell us, what are the plans of the national agency concerning information of culture of integrity in schools?
Послухав виступи там.
I would like to, before answering a question, I would like to comment about what I have heard from my colleagues. There are no developed countries in the world with high-level corruption. That is why if we want to become a developed country, we should start from eradicating corruption. And the civil society had contributed much to the diminishing of corruption, but to eradicate the corruption in education and to build up integral society, we need consolidation of efforts NACP is a young institution. It was formed some years ago, and we work very eagerly based on a strong political will of the country leadership. Our objective is to form zero tolerance to corruption, to overcome corruption in education, and to bring up the future generations with a full understanding of what corruption is and how it should be prevented. And I believe that very soon the strategy will be passed about anti-corruption, and then within 2 months, the government will need to develop the action plan for the next 5 years, how to implement the strategy, newly adopted strategy. That's why I encourage you to get involved and to produce your own recommendations, what should be included into the action plan, and to become a part of the broader public policy in anti-corruption area. The cabinet ministers and I myself will be involved into drafting of that program, that action plan, and I encourage you to think about the items to be included into this plan. Then we have a special project which is called the Transparent School. Transparent School, and what does it include? It includes assessment of risks inherent in education, and then our measures to mitigate these risks. Usually corruption is inherent in some processes, and having understood the risks, you may apply proper instruments how to prevent it. And then, having done that, we will be able to diminish corruption at the level of the tools and mechanisms. Of course, we have less understanding about the content of what may happen, but here we need partnership with you. I mean, training courses for teachers, for students. Having analyzed the current situation, Serhiy mentioned that even training course could be turned into a source of corruption. That's why we have to develop courses which would be really useful and not just become a part of the corrupt schemes. And we have to assess the teachers' work at all levels and understand the corruption risks inherent in it too. We analyzed your materials, and I can promise that we are eager to produce similar materials for all the educational community, for students and for the faculty. Perhaps not all the stakeholders are interested in total integrity, but because they get some benefits from corrupt practices, but you cannot tolerate corruption in minor things. You have to eradicate corruption totally and to require for full best practice. That is, you cannot combine partial corruption with integrity. This all the described procedures demonstrate why we devote so much time to the risk assessment of corruption in educational area. And by October, we hope to launch the Institute of Whistleblowers. And the biggest problem for me is to understand who has to respond to the information from whistleblowers. It will have very easy algorithm how to act, but it is not easy to decide who have to tackle the problem immediately. That is, each whistleblower has to report a situation to the person who is authorized to resolve the issue, who has full the responsibility. Also, we understand that besides teachers and students, we have one more stakeholder. This is administration of educational institutions, and they also interact with the budget managers, and there are some risks in these contacts. And the latest amendments to the legislation allow broad public to participate in funds allocation, public funds allocation, and this would allow us to minimize risks in this aspect. I'm absolutely sure that we are able to cope with all the challenges that we face today. And this would allow us to ensure integral training process and integrity of the future generations. I would like to add a very short recommendation. Let us approach to the Institute of the Educational Content Modernization and request them to announce new textbook call for the integrity or anti-corruption textbook. I'm ready to support this idea to produce new textbook for schools, for universities. You mentioned something about books and textbooks. Actually, all those materials are already on the website in open circulation in internet, but and you can upload them and use them broadly and free of charge. But the issue quite often is to get hard copy of those materials, and if you want to get these hard copies, it's not so easy. You have to find money to print up and to disseminate it. But when it comes to the content, you may upload the content from the website and use it. You have to reflect on the content and decide how to overcome the problem, how to resolve the problem. Children have to understand the problem and how to cope with it. Thank you, colleagues. We come to our final stage, to Q&A session. And in this stage, the first question. What international partners, or at what international partners should Ukraine rely in first term in its anti-corruption work today? I believe that we should look very closely on Romania, because they are leaders in anti-corruption work among our neighbors today. But doing that, we should not under-evaluate ourselves, because Ukraine had already introduced public e-declarations of government officials as compulsory measure earlier than Romania. We also had introduced electronic service Prozoro for public procurement procedures, while Romania does not have it yet. And by the way, these mechanisms are rather good, and we need to give more time to feel the effect of that. Yes, I fully agree with you, but on the other hand, we have to improve the tools which we already have and which you already mentioned. But, for example, the criteria, when we procure public catering for schools via Prozoro, the only one criteria is price, the lowest price. And this is the big problem. And the same is true about textbooks. These days, I read a lot of source messages that there is a huge shortage of textbooks. For example, the 5th grade students and of books, which means that one children will get them, another would not get. And what will be the distribution principle? Who will get, who would not? That there is no systemic work which would we will put systemic responsibility. Until we do not have responsible person for each project, it won't be implemented. Some regions have the excessive numbers and volumes of textbooks. Some regions does not have it, and we do not have reliable educational statistics. We have big problems with the statistics. We do not know how many schools do we have, how many teachers do we have, how much money we spend on educational system, etc.
I fully agree with you, and I invite you to the version of the strategy, and before this, also, we invite you to assess the current situation. We invite you to work with us. The best international practices were mentioned by our colleagues who brought the manual. And This is the experience how to teach anti-corruption and integrity in schools. Speaking about local budgets and who is responsible, the next question is about the role of local power to fight corruption in education. And please be brief, dear colleagues, in order to understand where to move to. So first, what we should do, we should have a program for territorial communities heads, because heads of the communities, they do not understand this issue. And we see a lot of examples of improper use of funds. So they organize educational system in different ways locally. So 99% of schools in Ukraine, they are communal, they are community-based, and they have this task. And also we should properly calculate educational subsidy. I would like to continue. They should understand the law properly. Educational institutions are autonomous, law says, and they replace this notion of autonomy because each head wants to be the head above the principal of the school. And also the development of educators. The landscape changes, and now the main focus is on the centers of professional development, and the territorial bodies of power, they are the founders of these centers, and they do not properly understand the potential of these centers. And they try to save funds, and they create small collectives of 5 to 10 people who support teachers in the territory, and in 5 or 10 years we will face problems because of this. And this issues concerning integrity and values, they are connected to this. We should support our teachers properly in order to have good results in the future. So locally, the founders should understand that they are responsible, and they should implement the law. The law envisages this, and if they implement properly, then they will have good results. And one more example. This is painful for me. A mayor of a big city appointed stoker in the school. He invited a stoker to him to communicate with him and to appoint him. And the Deputy Council, they also adopt the Christian ethics course, and there is a central body who forms the educational policy, and this body should do this. And this is not responsibility of the deputies. And so some are more equal than others. And locally, if you're speaking about money, the responsibility of local power is to support local educational institutions, because subsidy is not only about salaries. This is about chalk, repair works, curtains, and equipment of the school. And for example, they have some people who they know, they provide money to their acquaintances, for example, 5 million, and they do not provide the money to those who need it. And in Kiev, there will be a presentation of the map of needs, and the school should list all their needs, and the system automatically having some criteria of risk. And the system chooses what educational institution will be provided with funding. And we should not base our activities on common practices that we have now. And do you have questions, dear colleagues? If not, we end in this discussion. And I would like to sum up. So this is a comprehensive problem, and we started with the positivity, and then we got to heated discussions, and everyone raised these painful topics that they have, and due to UCMC, we were able to get together and discuss all this. And I believe then we will have coordination of efforts, systemic approach, communication, and we should move ahead using the instruments we have and to get united. So we thank our audience. And please visit our sites, join projects, and let's build together this integrity education in Ukraine. Thank you.